Our agenda has more room probably than theirs did. I don't think.
I think they're,
Sheet off of you on this, but that's a bit.
Okay, we can
Yeah,
cheat together.
Everything's good.
okay, are we ready?
Yeah.
All right. We are calling the July 26, 2022 finance meeting to order. Let it be noted that all the members are present. Our finance director, our parks director, and our chief of operations is also here. And the mayor was here and he'll probably be back. So, okay, the first item on the agenda is acceptance of the agenda. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Okay, I'd like to add something to the agenda under other agenda, under ordinances and resolutions. I'd like to add resolution 2022-36, a resolution ratifying the transition plan, implementing the city's new ward boundaries subsequent to the 2020 census. Do I hear a motion?
I so move.
Second.
Okay, do I hear a motion to add this to the agenda then? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, do we have an agenda? All in favor of the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we have an agenda. Okay. Approval of June, the first item on the agenda is the minutes. Approval of June 28, 2022 meeting minutes. Do I hear a motion?
I so move.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Any additions, deletions, discussion? Okay, all in favor of the accepting the minutes from June 28, 2022, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, those minutes have been accepted. Or under ordinance and resolutions, under A, ordinance 2022-20, an ordinance appropriating funds for parks improvements. Do I hear a motion?
I so move.
Second.
Okay, discussion. Start.
Well, I like this, and I'm glad that we have staff input as to where the money is the best fit. I know that it was brought up during our meeting to look at the Bradford Berry House as a possible recipient for this allocation. So I was hoping that you could educate us on why staff, I mean, I kind of am making some assumptions that it's because we're not ready to do anything there. So
Yeah,
we
we-
would just be holding the money.
Sure, we don't actually own that property.
Oh, we don't own it yet.
No,
Okay.
I don't think until
Oh, that makes sense.
planning process, we go through the planning process to take ownership of that property. I think at some point when we own it, we can revisit it. We have current needs for, our
Mhm.
football teams, soccer teams, the lights at Volunteer Park make a lot of sense. The shelters, obviously, that's very obvious. They have one, why would we
Sure.
And
some
that's
money
at
into-
Saunders Ferry, right?
just not?
Yeah.
So they just are the two that were the most apparent to us for
Okay.
immediate need of
Yeah.
funding.
I didn't realize that we didn't own the Bradford Berry House yet. That'll be sometime, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I don't have an exact date, but
Yeah.
it'll be months.
Okay. In that case, I think this seems like there shouldn't be objections. I would expect.
Karen?
Yes, I do have a question. Thank you. Do we currently have money set aside in your budget for repairs at Saunders?
We
Fair.
have money for like daily repairs. I
Okay.
mean, like if we need to fix light bulbs or,
But not the structural.
but in terms of replacing every roof on every building, doing major overhauls, that would be outside of daily repairs.
Okay.
And we've been talking as a staff, park staff, honestly, they've been after me since I've got here as the director
Mhm.
to put a plan together. We talked about trying to do one per year even, but to have a chance to put a new roof on every shelter that has never had they've never had new roofs, to my knowledge. I asked Mr. Lamar and he said since 1979, when he got here, there was never roofs put on. The stone work is in pretty good shape on all of them. That's a blessing. But there are certainly woodwork and electrical issues. We're hoping that we'll be able to do some renovations in the restrooms and maybe add HVAC to those where we don't have to close them in the winter. That is a constant point of consternation with the boaters, that we have a portable restroom from November till the end of February because we have to shut that bathroom down.
Got it.
So it's that park has become quite used, to say the least.
Yeah. well,
Yeah, is it my
gym.
imagination or are we using it much?
We as a staff are intentionally
more,
using it more,
yeah.
but the community is asking to use it more and more. Like this, it's like the secret's out all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's
Beautiful.
beautiful.
out
And
there.
It
it's a gorgeous place. I mean, it can be used for so many, it's very versatile. At the same time, there are things such as it's not on city water. So eventually we've got to get that. If
What
we're gonna
is it,
keep
as
having big
well?
crowds
What
there,
do what,
it's on septic.
okay.
So we have quite the issue sometimes when there's a large crowd.
And I know that one
Hmm.
restroom, I don't know what, I guess it's the picnic shelter 1 or
Mhm.
2 or A or B or something, that where I sent you a message about that stump of stone.
Mhm,
That restroom is the oldest in our park system,
correct.
and it's not ADA compliant, is it? I would have to assume.
I mean, there's not an adult changing table. I'm not 100% sure the doors are wide enough. You're getting even further. Like if you look at the ADA transition plan that Public Works did, for the parks portion of it is in the multi-millions.
So,
The
but the
retrofits,
restroom that's by the shelter that's by the lake, where the
Mhm,
dock, that restroom is significantly newer.
It is.
Okay.
So we ever approached HUD to be able to get some city water there?
I have
or
asked,
Is that a
I've
grant
asked-
that we need to apply for?
no, it's not a
or-
grant. I think they have, there's a neighborhood close by.
Yes.
I've asked Mr. Rewa to kind of send me his best guesstimate
Uh-huh.
without being real official about it. And he's gonna get me that, so. I'm optimistic it could be done. It'd be running a lot of underground PVC pipe all the way to that boat ramp bathroom.
We're talking about sewer, right?
Sewer. That's when I say city water, I mean
Yeah.
sewer.
But that would be such a huge
It would
improvement.
be a major improvement.
Huge.
So the water it's not well water.
No.
Okay, I'm just,
I meant
okay,
the sewer.
gotcha.
When I
So
said,
not
when I
separate
said
Plumbing.
sewer,
Yeah, I knew.
Yeah.
that.
sorry about that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Well, I have
Well,
no problem with that.
Okay, well, I just have to still say how disappointed that I am that we rated, and I'm gonna say rated, that fund, and we're not gonna be saving any more for any more land acquisition. So I'm just very still disappointed that we did that. Because I was here on the board. You people were not here on the board when we went through all
I
that.
understand.
And that was my only objection of why I voted no for that huge purchase, because we didn't have the money. But anyway, well, let's move forward then. Andy, you feel comfortable? Jesse, you feel comfortable with the use of the funds? in this
Yes,
one?
ma'am.
Okay. All right, any other discussion? Okay, all in favor of ordinance 2022-20, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that passed unanimous, that has been unanimously recommended. Okay, next item on the agenda is resolution, is that new resolution? 2022-36. A resolution ratifying the transition plan, implementing the city's new ward boundaries subsequent to the 2020 census. Do I hear a motion?
I so move.
Second. Okay, discussion. I talked to John Bradley today about this because I got a little bit confused reading it, but pretty much what this is going to do is just have 12 aldermen, not 13. Period. And Lee will still be able to serve the remainder of his 2-year additional term, which is additional two more years, representing Ward 2, even though he was redistricted out of Ward 2. So
The boundaries for Ward 2 have significantly changed.
Mhm.
And so I feel uncomfortable voting on this here until we hear from him. I'd like to hear from him.
from Lee,
Yes, because
Well,
he's the only one mentioned
I
my name.
think the mayor,
in this.
yeah, you're right. The mayor said they had spoken, and I don't, in that email that we received today, I don't recall if he relayed information
He
about
didn't re-
Lee's
he didn't-
feelings.
he
He
didn't
just said
relay
they
any
spoke.
information. I just think publicly we ought to
Yeah,
give Lee an opportunity to
Oh, I
speak, and
agree.
see how
I agree.
comfortable he is with
Mhm.
it.
yeah. I know that, I don't know, because I am not a lawyer, but the charter reads to me like you have to live in your ward. It also reads to me like you can only have 12 aldermen. And it also, we know that somebody's elected to a 4-year term, they serve their 4 years. So it seems like we have to sacrifice one of those things.
Yes.
I'm looking
Yes,
at you,
it
Jesse,
does.
because I'm sure you've spoken with Bradley about this at length. And I said, the mayor was here, but he's obviously had to step out. So,
Yeah, so when you look at redistricting, one of the things that it talks about is that there has to be some transition plan.
mhm.
And unless you were to keep boundaries to where no alderman was ever, no ward ever went around an existing alderman, there has to be some type of transition plan. And so this is a transition plan. There are many options you could choose. Our charter doesn't say that there's no transition plan that's allowed. It talks about 12 aldermen, but with new ward boundaries, there has to be, you're either gonna,
It says
have
12
13.
aldermen. It says you have to live in your ward
So
and we can't,
if-
we have to choose one.
and if, right now, if you were to keep 3 in Ward 4, well, then there would be 3 in, which the charter says 2. So, I mean, when you redistrict, there's going to have to be some transition plan whenever you redistrict and an alderman is no longer in their existing ward.
But as far as the components we're dealing with here are living in your ward or not, if it had happened to be somebody else other than Lee, because it's not about that it's him,
yeah, right.
and the number of aldermen, are there other components that we need to consider that you're aware of, or are those the two that we have to try to?
I think the main one was that you cannot cut someone's term short.
Sure.
So, when you look at who would be the most appropriate to do Ward 2, many might say Lee because some of the people who originally voted for him are still in Ward 2. That was the ward that he was voted in. I don't know in substance how much would change, and it is just for a limited period of time to get back into compliance with what the charter says and what the
Mhm.
2 aldermen per ward. So it appears to be a mechanism to get us into compliance per the new ward boundaries that we have.
And there's just not a way to be in complete compliance during the transition period. So,
In the redistricting information that I've read talks about a transition plan. So the transition plan is getting you from one point to another point, there's going to be something different in between to get you from point A to point B.
sure.
So this is, I think, with,
Did,
the mayor and
did MTS give their blessing to this?
They didn't.
They
I thought
did.
John drew it in.
for the ordinance. I
For the
thought,
one- I'm talking
For
about
the
the resolution.
redistricting, yeah.
Yeah, the resolution, I don't think MTS looked at. Now for the redistricting, MTS was involved in.
No, for this particular
I
instance.
think John, that's a John question. Oh, yes, they did. I'm
I
sorry.
think, I
I'm sorry, yes, they
believe
did.
Bradley,
Yes,
when I
they
talked to him, when I called him today to,
Yes,
because
they
I
did.
was a little confused the way
When
it
you said it, I was
was.
thinking Alicia.
I
It wasn't
bel-
Alicia, it was Gary.
I believe he did say MTS gave their blessing to it.
that was my understanding.
And 2
Yeah.
years is, that's a short period of time, really.
The state has had a similar situation where they had a state senator that was outside his district for 2 years.
Obviously, somebody's dealt with this somewhere before in
Mhm.
government, so.
I mean, I don't have a problem with it as long as Lee is in agreement with. it.
Right. And that's why I say I feel uncomfortable voting. I'd like to pass it with
No recommendation.
no recommendation. That's what I'd like.
Until we hear from Lee. Okay.
I'd like Lee to have an opportunity to speak.
We can do it. Let's pass it on to Boma.
Okay.
Do I hear a motion to pass it on to Boma?
I'll make that motion.
Okay,
My
second.
second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that'll be passed on to Bowman.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now we have our, oh, that's the end of our- we have our reports. I'm gonna
All right.
Pass that on to Robert.
All right. I actually did give away my last copy, so
There you go.
I'm gonna, don't mind, I appreciate it, I'll give it right back. Play the shell game. So for activity in the month of June, which would be sales that occurred in May, but collected in June, passed on to us in July. We collected $1,697,000, almost 1.7, which I'll call your attention to was the highest we'd ever collected back in 2021. So it was 1.7. So that compared to last year is $176,000 above month-to-month comparison over 2021's June. And that also equates to just over $2 million over what was over last year, collected over the growth of last year. As compared to what was budgeted, that's $3.2 million over what was originally budgeted. I'll remind everyone that traditionally and what's recommended for budgeted numbers is a 10-year growth percentage, with heavy emphasis on what we've tried to do is put heavy emphasis on the last couple of years, knowing how much things are changing. We did go in excess of that, what that calculation would show to get to 15,250,000, and we still exceeded that by 3.2 million.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
How much did we budget this year? Sales tax.
We budgeted 17,250,000, which at the time that was occurring, we were not quite sure what April, May, and June would look like. Was certainly hoping it would break 1.5 million each month as an average, and it looks like it's blown far past that. But at the time, that's what we were
Well, we do
shooting for.
we do budget conservatively.
correct.
That's wonderful news.
Yes.
Congratulations, everybody.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks to the citizens. So for hotel motel, we do have a collection of the full FY20, a good picture of what's been collected there. Which I failed to I should have gave you a better summarization. That running balance 432,000 is not actually what was collected. That's what was collected plus the beginning balance numbers. So I apologize. Didn't quite
So
recognize
it's
that.
432 less the 81.
Yes, so I apologize. Didn't realize that till too late.
That's right. We're
In the realm of
We're at the
$300,
$1,000 mark
Right.
already. That's
collecting
that's great.
$350,000 in FY22. That being said, I know last month we talked about what was being spent and what the actual ending balance of it would be. I'll hand you a couple of documents here just to go over. They're both relative to this discussion. I've highlighted really what is pertinent. But essentially, what was budgeted here on the front sheet was debt payoff of 200,000. The reason that number was chosen was we were not quite sure what we'd be collecting in hotel motel. So it was equivalent to essentially what we would collect, $200,000 as collected. Debt payoff was going to be 200,000. What the second sheet there is the debt that is in reference to being paid off. And as you can see, obviously that is far in excess over the $200,000. And
So is that the balance forward then?
the discussion
Difference.
was, well, the discussion that we had last month was does this money assist in paying off the full amount of this debt, or does it stick to 200,000 only and the excess amount?
Now, this debt is the debt that,
Lady Farm. It
Okay.
was restructured, yes, it was refinanced. But this is the original amounts allotment prior to restructuring. Just wanted to show you that the debt that it's related to is far in excess of what we budgeted.
okay,
It's more for reference than
Mhm.
anything.
So then the question becomes, the rest of the funds are unallocated at this time?
Well, that's the discussion. It's, our fund balance policy kind of says that through year end, finance department has the authority to assign funds. However, we report that to the finance committee, and they have the authority to then either assign differently, remove the assignment, or by a simple majority vote. So rather than do that, again, these are unaudited, so it may be another month or so before we're finalized
Okay.
down to the penny. But
then we could decide at that point.
we could vote at that point, but,
Okay.
for discussion purposes, 200,000 versus, in essence, what was originally budgeted 470,000 for that debt. Not recommending that occur, but just saying those are kind of the two options, but,
The debt is at 2.6.
well, that would be the,
I think it's lower than
The-
that, isn't it?
the inline hockey, and I don't.
Yeah, this said it was a
This one is less.
2.9 7-year capital outlay.
So
but-
that's the Beatty Farm.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Which was when this all occurred with the land reservation. And sign hotel motel. Sorry, I gave you a Beatty Farm, just mixed up two different,
I will just
Okay.
say that I am about as debt averse as a person can be. but
Sure.
I can also math, and in these high inflationary times, it does not make sense to me to pay off debt that's financed at this kind of interest rate.
I will add, it's not an additional payment, it's just
Yeah,
unreserving.
but no, but the spread that we're dealing
Sure.
with, I think would be. I mean, I can't predict the future. And we're in crazy times with inflation, but I don't think it's gonna go back down. I think
Well,
it's
the
only
Fed is
gonna
meeting
increase
again
from
tomorrow.
here.
And probably gonna increase it by either 3/4 or 1 point tomorrow again.
Really?
So the prime is gonna be well into the fives.
But I mean, I think inflation's not gonna be slowing down. And we'd be better to invest this money in. To me, the safest bet would be park infrastructure.
So in that case,
Or,
so in that case.
I don't know,
it-
whatever is, I would have to defer to the staff for a recommendation,
Sure.
but I know these funds can't just be spent.
Sure, so,
You can't get pay raises with this. There's
well, it's
rules. And-
depending on how you look at it, right? So if you went the $200,000 option, where we're sticking to only those that were budgeted,
Mhm.
and any excess collection of revenue beyond the expenditure budget line item go into reserve, and that is what you're talking about, where it does require board vote to use in excess of that, which is perfectly acceptable. The opposite would be that if collections were made in excess of what was budgeted, they also covered just as much, then those fall into the general fund, and in that case are funding the rest of our operations essentially. So if it's kind of like saying if $1 is allowed expenditure, $2 is allowed expenditure. I mean, you've determined that it is an okay and allowable expenditure already. At 200,000 versus 400,000, it's still an allowable expenditure, is all we're saying.
Okay.
So I'm not recommending 100% one way or the other. Just kind of giving a couple options, throwing it out there to at least think about and discuss. Now that we know how much is collected.
And how long are we waiting to get final audited numbers?
Well, we'll have closed the fiscal year. We have to have fiscal year closed by the end of August.
August,
So,
okay.
yeah.
All right.
Mm.
Then I'm gonna think about it.
Sure.
Reserve my
Well,
opinion.
we don't have to
on
vote
what-
on this.
Right.
No,
Well, no, we have to wait, so.
It won't, I'll say,
Is this an enterprise fund? Did we
it's
create an
not.
enterprise fund?
It's
for
not.
this?
I'll
So
say
we're
the
just-
numbers aren't gonna change drastically.
Does the comptroller like enterprise funds or neutral or just like?
Neutral, I'd say
Okay.
neutral.
I
It's,
had,
it's more,
for some reason,
Correct.
I had a feeling that the comptroller did not. You think it's a neutral?
I think it's a neutral thing. Typically, just in general, setting up a separate fund is something that's, there's typically a legal basis behind it, right? Like, so if the board voted to do so, that would be our legal basis. But
Okay.
for another example
makes
is stormwater, where there's a US legislation from the EPA. State Street Aid, that's a tax set aside both feds and state.
Mhm.
We
Drug
have to
fund.
use that in that purpose. Drug fund, we have
Sure.
laws telling us how we can and can't spend.
Right,
it.
right.
Same would be here. If the board wanted to set it aside,
Well, I think we decided not to make it an enterprise fund.
essentially.
In the beginning, we wanted to see how it,
Mm,
because it was so new back in what, 2020
Right.
or 2019, whenever we enacted this legislation to actually collect this
Right.
tax. So it seems like it's working
Sure,
like it should.
sure.
Yeah.
And again, like I said, these numbers aren't going to change drastically. It's just the method of
We just have to
accounting
make sure
for
that
it.
we report it properly. that's
Correct.
all.
Correct.
And it seems like that's happening, so.
Well, thank you, Robert.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
All right, any other discussion? Reports? Any other updates? Jesse, did you want to say anything or?
Ordinance 22-20 was recommended at Public Works as well.
And it will be at Bowman at the end of August. We have a meeting first time in
We
August.
don't,
We don't,
The end of August?
Yeah,
we already passed our two scheduled ones, I guess.
no, we did meet 2 times in June, it's July and August.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
So-
August
Which is kind of the
gonna
opposite of the
the
kids'
end.
schools, I mean, not the opposite, but the kids' school schedule is different, but I think only Russ has kids in school, so.
be- Any other discussion or updates, Robert,
Of course.
or? Okay.
Yeah, I moved
Do I
to
hear a
close.
motion to
To
adjourn?
adjourn.
Okay.